happy. Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily, for having me on.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. I am so excited to be back with you today. And to say that I am super excited about our episode today is a huge understatement. Today, we're talking about plant medicine and the future of beauty. And I have an extremely special guest to introduce all of you today for those of you that may not know her. Miss Rosemary Gladstar is an incredible herbalist, teacher, and author, and is the most respected herbalist in the country today. I am very honored that she is sharing her time with us so that I can attempt to condense all the things that I have been studying, the reasons why, what we're doing, and how we're doing it with my audience. Um, there's so much synergy here. Sunshine Botanicals has always been about herbal medicine meets corrective skincare, or as I often call it, clinical skincare from a botanical perspective. As a holistic skin therapist and esthetician, I'm all about results on the skin. And the world that we live in today with beauty, whether you're in the aesthetic world or you're a consumer online, trying to find ways to treat aging and problem skin conditions, there's so much noise, so much confusion, and we it's like the wild, wild west. We have no idea or who to even turn to, which is why it's such a huge honor to have Miss Rosemary as our guest this morning. She is my go-to person for all things natural medicine. And to tie this in deeper for you guys that don't know more about our story, my husband was an amazing, gifted herbalist. He was a teacher, an author, and was extremely passionate about helping people reconnect with the earth and understand that we're tripping over more medicine to get in the car, to drive to the pharmacy, to fix common things because it's a lost art. And in this confusing world, there's so much woo woo, there's so much who knows what. And I think we have information overload. I am beyond psyched that I can introduce you to Miss Rosemary because, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, not only is she an amazing teacher, but she has an awesome formal herb school that I will talk to you about a little bit later in the program. Also, my husband had almost, well, I don't know if he had all of her books, but and kind of like what you see in her, and a very gifted teacher. He is the man that wildcrafted, we'll talk more about that later, and created our original tinctures that basically made up the raw materials for our formulations. That's how Sunshine Botanicals got started. So Miss Rosemary and I go way back before we ever even met, and she had no idea that Phil was really following in her footsteps. So, um, to be able to carry my husband's work forward is hugely important. We lost him very suddenly to an unexpected illness in 2017, and it rocked my world so hard that I just doubled down on me and on the brand and on the people that were around me because it's been about a mission. It's not been to build a multi-million-dollar beauty brand. That's not the goal. The goal is to solve problems, help people understand the science behind plant medicine, and know where to go to find enough information to be informed consumers so you're not just buying things that fill up bathroom drawers and never really end up working, right? I think we can all kind of identify with that. Um, she is, wow. Uh, Pardon me. There's so much on my mind, guys. I'm going to refer to my notes every now and then because it will keep me focused. But there are, we'll start with things in the beauty space because that's why we're here. Most people follow me because they want to get the facts and the truth on treatments, products, and approaches for different skins. And I want to address during the session today, all the marketing hype, the mislabeled natural claims. It's a $1 billion beauty industry, let's face it. And people buy things based on a good idea without really even having an understanding of how to evaluate what they're purchasing or what they're using. We're going to put a stop to that because Miss Rosemary is here, and she's going to be our go-to person to understand things. The misuse of herbal technology as well, and how to read labels so we're not just looking at greenwashing. So we just want to sort through all the confusion and really get down to it. So let's just start with how about we actually meet Rosemary and give her a chance to speak? She's amazing. And Miss Rosemary, thank you so much for joining us today. Rosemary Gladstar.
Thanks, Emily. I'm honored to be here. And I love your enthusiasm and passion. It just bubbles out of you. It's so beautiful. I do want to say that I don't think that, I think you said something about me being like the best herbalist or whatever. I certainly am not. I'm one of really actually a very large flock of who've kind of just devoted our lives to learning about plants. I will say that I have spent a long time, like it's been almost 50 years that I've been studying and working with plants. So I can say that very honestly, but uh, yeah. And I am really excited and honored for this discussion. So thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you. Let me just give you a preview of what we're about to cover that we will get to, in sequence here. But Rosemary Gladstar, you can certainly look her up online. Her books are, powerful tools for learning, but she has an incredible herb school, the art and science of, is it plant medicine or herbal medicine?
It's the science and art of herbalism. Yes.
Herbalism. Yes. Oh my gosh. How about formal education? How would you like to go to herb school, right? And know what you're doing? That's like amazing. She also has an incredible place, and I'll let you speak about this later. I'll just give you a little teaser. But she has a beautiful retreat called Sage Mountain Retreat in Vermont. And it is absolutely incredible. And I'll let her tell you more about it. But Sunshine Botanicals will have a retreat at Rosemary's Place soon. So stay tuned. We are all going to go to experience the healing power of nature in Vermont. So that's coming soon. The traditions also on plant medicine. We're going to be talking about skin conditions today, and I'll let Rosemary, you can kind of jump in on some of these. But there are so many inflammatory conditions on the skin that take many different forms, from acne to rosacea to, um, you know, dermatitis of all types. And also, I work a lot with oncology and cancer patients who are recovering from chemotherapy, radiation, and and the disease itself takes a tremendous toll on the body and on the skin. So there are some incredible roots, herbs, and plants that are powerful treatments for this. And so we will let Rosemary walk us through that in a few minutes. Also, I want to talk about let's bring the focus to products that you might be using. If you are in Sephora or you're in Ulta or you're online, wherever it might be, and you pick up a product and it looks great and the marketing looks super and you go to read the label, do you have any idea what you're really even looking at? Guys, I know the business, and it's oftentimes it can be smoke and mirrors. It can be confusing. There's some good things. There are some scary things. How do you know the difference? And that's really being able to identify ingredients in the products that you're using to make sure, for one thing, that it's right for the condition you're trying to treat. And that's my passion. And that's where my podcasts come in. So you can understand, wait a minute, that might be a great product, but I don't need it because my skin is not performing this way. So that's again where what's really important is to be able to identify or at least scan a product label to know that what your active ingredients are. And when in the herb world, there are so many incredible things, which is why I want to go on an herb walk at Sage Mountain to show you these ingredients that grow right out of the ground. So, the also the other things we'll touch on with Rosemary is her activism. She has a podcast of her own called that she can talk about a little bit later, Voices of the Elders. She has a brand new book out called The Generosity of Plants. That's a must read for everybody. And she is a strong advocate. And Rosemary has taken legal action to preserve and protect herbal traditions. And she has stood up to corporate overreach, defending herbal wisdom in court. So the person that you are looking at is a powerhouse, and she doesn't shy away from the issues that need to be addressed. But she is such a gentle soul and understands the energetics of medicinal plants. And when Rosemary has the floor, I want her to take you through it. So we're talking about roots, herbs, and plants that can be um, tinctured and formulated into active ingredients for skincare products. And I've found that I use a lot of terminology that people go, "What? What is a tincture?" So Rosemary can even talk about that. But um, there's practice. I've always called for three things that makes an effective, amazing skincare practice or clinic or for home, and that's energy, frequency, and medicinal plants. Those are the three things that you will hear me talk about the most, because when those come together and you understand the energetics involved, that's where the results are, and that's where the power is. So, Rosemary, could we just begin with a little bit about, tell us more about your background, and I've fast forwarded to where you are right now, but where your passion came from and your knowledge of plant medicine and your approach to teaching others. Those of us that get it but don't understand how to go about it. Tell us where we start. Tell us what your background is, will you please?
Well, I always say I was one of the fortunate ones. I was growing up at a time when herbalism was very deeply underground. It really was not
Mhm.
available the way that we see it today. It was practiced in small pockets in the United States, mostly in very rural areas where there was a lot of poverty because people couldn't afford medicine, and also in ethnic groups. And our native tribes, of course, were still some of them using some of the native remedies. But herbalism had gone very deeply underground right after World War II, in fact. And, it was kind of the age of the magic pill and modern medicine and pharmaceuticals, and mass agriculture. Even our food changed dramatically after World War II. But when I was growing up, which was, back in the like 1950s, et cetera, I was so fortunate because my grandmother, my Armenian grandmother on my mother's side, she had been a survivor of the Armenian genocide, and tell us when we were children growing up that it was her faith in God, because she was very, very deeply religious, and her knowledge of the plants that saved her life. And she meant that literally. It wasn't like, a tale. It was actually the truth of how they were able to survive. And so she sort of felt it, I think, in some ways like a religious duty almost, to teach her children and grandchildren about plants. It wasn't that I was signaled out. It was, I was just part of my big family, and my grandmother would go out into the garden and she would weed, but many of those weeds went into her basket and came into the kitchen, mostly to be made into food, but a lot of home treatments were used at that time. I just had a fascination. I kind of grabbed onto it from a young age, and just, really felt the plants entering me, felt it was like my calling. I wouldn't have said that at that time if you asked me as a child, but when I look back and reflect, it was like I sort of knew that was my path. And so, I read as many books as I could. I tried to learn as much as I could. There wasn't very much available back in the, 1960s and 1970s. It's hardly any herb schools at all, very few herb books. Thankfully, the herb books that were available were really good. And so in 1972, I opened my first herb store in the little hometown that I grew up in. And that was sort of what got me started. I started the herb store really probably knowing as little as most of the listeners, because there really wasn't a lot available, maybe a little bit more, but I learned, like I learned quickly. People would come in and they'd ask for help, and I would help as much as I could. And if I didn't know things, I try to ask, my friends who were in the medical profession or older herbalists. And So I kind of just learned myself. But after doing that for, maybe 2 or 3 years, I thought, I just want to bring together, some of the local healers and some of the other people I hear about who are practicing herbalism. And so I started these gatherings back in, I think it was like 1974, 1975, that started bringing together actually large groups. People who came from all over because there wasn't much happening. And then those tumbled into like, well, people wanted to know more. These would be like weekend retreats. And so then after doing that for a couple of years, people wanted to learn more. And I thought, well, I'll open an herb school. So I started my first school was California School of Herbal Studies, which is still going. It's one of the largest, it's the oldest running herb school in the United States, still in Northern California. So it was just kind of a calling that, it seems like I would offer something to the world and it was well received, and it would grow, and then there would be another need and I would just step into it with never really thinking about long-term or big implications of it. It was just, sort of youthful enthusiasm, useful energy, and the desire to do good on the planet, and that was how I felt I was doing good. So yeah, it just kind of kept growing. I started a couple of very small businesses at the time, one being Traditional Medicinals, which is a fairly large company now. It's actually the largest seller of medicinal plants. But when I started it, and I was only involved in it for the first 10 years, but it was just the desire to put medicinal herbs out and make them available for people. So Traditional Medicinals just celebrated their 50th anniversary this year to give an idea of how long this work has been going on. But yeah, so it's been very exciting to me to be involved in this field and to play what I would consider a part, but not my own small part. Yeah.
Wow. This is fantastic. Tell me about, I'd like for you to talk about a couple things that go into this. You also wildcraft. You might be able to, I'd like for you to speak to that from your language because I'm busy helping people understand what that even is. Because when you evaluate a beauty product, wherever it is, and you see buzzwords and so many things, what does it even mean? You have to know the source who you're buying from, number one, and you have to know kind of how they go about putting things together. So, looking at all the ingredients, I would love for you to talk about just the art of wildcrafting and why that's important. And also, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the energetics of plants. And I am fascinated with the um why did I go blank? The art of signature. What am I trying to say?
The yeah, plant signatures. It's the yeah, when
Yes,
you look at a plant and you kind of look at the way
doctrine of signatures.
the
That's what I was
doctrine
trying to grab.
signatures.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, that's a lot. But if you can just kind of touch on why wildcrafting is important, the processing that goes into once you identify a medicinal plant and know which part of the plant that you use, whether it's the roots, the stems, the flowers, whatever, then you have to extract the medicine from it, which is a tincturing process and which is how we make cosmetics. And I'll never forget one of the first things that Dr. Phil made for me is still in our line right now. It is a powerhouse. It's called Rapid Repair Fluid. And he tinctured comfrey root, and he has a blend with comfrey roots and comfrey leaves. But he would tincture them, and he would always use the lunar calendar when harvesting and from tincturing. Now that sounds amazing, but it's the energetics. It's not woo woo. It's not new age. It's not any of that. It's just I call it good old farmer's almanac. How you're growing herbs and plants, right? So that's my language. I would like for you to help everybody understand the energetics of plants and how we extract how much medicine is in plants and that it is possible to treat so many things with God's good herbs.
Great. Well, I think you did an excellent job explaining it, but I'll also just kind of give a little background. So wildcrafting is one of the arts of herbalism. It's really just about going out and gathering the plants and really understanding the seasons and the cycles that they grow, like when they're at their best and when they're um, their medicine is at the strongest and most potent. It's actually a very simple art. It's pretty much like when you're going out to your vegetable garden, honestly, and you're looking at when the tomatoes are ripe or when the turnips are ripe. You know, you wouldn't harvest your turnips in the middle of the summer necessarily. You usually wait till the fall when the roots are really juicy and strong and good, but you don't wait too long sometimes for some of the root vegetables because they get woody or hard. So it's pretty much using the same um, intelligence and consciousness and perception that we use when we're, you know, working in our garden. I mean, and also there's also the concern, of course, about wildcrafting because there's so many plant lovers these days and so many beautiful products and so many herbalists working with plants. So we really emphasize wildcrafting of mostly the common weedy species and be very mindful not to wildcraft native species because much like the natives of this land, the native species are at risk. So, you know, they need to be protected and cared for. And so we did start an organization called United Plant Savers. It's one of the works that I've done with plant conservation and preservation of being mindful because I did help to start this interest in, you know, making herbal products. I was one of those people who early on was going out and wildcrafting and really wanting to teach everybody to do it. And after about 20 or 30 years of that, of recognizing that the native populations actually needed us to be more focused on the protection of the native species because they were being over harvested primarily by pharmaceutical industries, like Golden Seal is a really good example of that, but also by large herb companies. So wildcrafting is one of our arts, but also I would say in learning the art of wildcrafting, it's also learning which plants are abundant. So all of our weedy species like dandelion and burdock and milk thistle and these really aggressive, incredible weedy species, we can wildcraft those freely and readily and use those in our medicine. But the native species, we need to be, as herbalists and plant lovers, we need to be very mindful of those populations. So they're here for our children, for future generations of plant lovers, but really more importantly for the earth itself, right? Because they form, and this moves us into that energetics that you're speaking about. So plants are not innate subjects, you know, they're innate objects. They're living beings. And it's really exciting right now in the field of science and plant biology that they're doing a lot of work discovering that plants actually have consciousness. They're not just comprised of chemical constituents. It'd be like trying to define human beings as just chemical properties, you know, that we have potassium and sodium and blood and iron, etc., in our bodies. But that isn't really what makes us. It's not our organ systems that make us. They make us alive. They keep us alive, but they're not the essence of who we are. We have we could call it a God essence or
We
a
have a
spirit
spirit.
essence. Yeah, a spirit essence. And plants do as well. And that's probably the most exciting thing about working with plants over anything. I would say even over about seeing how miraculous they are for the skin or how miraculous they are for healing the body. But it's really recognizing as people who work with plants, they begin to recognize that plants have this essence. And when you learn to work with that essence, it just becomes so deepening. And when you're making your medicine, and I'm sure you do this, Emily, but when you're making your products for the skin, when you tune into that essence, like when you're harvesting with prayer and you're making your medicines with love, that energy then becomes part of the medicine. It becomes part of what heals the skin and heals the body.
Absolutely.
And you were speaking about, you know, using the cycles of the moon, and it's absolutely not woo-woo, like cultures all around the world, both going back into history, but also into modern times, use the energetics of nature to help empower, we could call it impregnate the medicine and again, the skincare products that we're making. And we see it most obvious in the moon, like all of the planets and certainly the sun have a profound influence. Well, let's just use the sun for a minute. Like, you know, if you don't get a lot of sunlight for a while, people actually get a disease called seasonal light affective disorder, SAD, right? It's a real physical thing. Doctors treat it if you don't get enough light. But even in the wintertime, you know, if it's or in the summer, if we have long gray days, like 4 or 5 days of gray, we're all kind of walking around like down, right? And as soon as that sun comes out, our spirits lift up. So that is kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about energetics. And we really see it with the cycles of the moon. For instance, look at the ocean, how it responds to the moon. Our tides, like if anybody is lives near the ocean, tides are completely impacted by this planet that's like thousands, millions of miles away from us. And women also, like we know that ourselves, like so many women, their cycles are regulated by the moon. So many, not all women for certain, but a lot of women come that full moon. And I would say this, I've seen this because I've hosted large women's gatherings for almost 50 years, like where we have like 800 women come together to celebrate, healing and plants and herbs and women's spirit. And if it's a full moon, you can bet that so many women, even who don't normally have their full moon, when they're with all those women, they'll have their cycles on the full moon. So does the moon energize our medicine? Absolutely. And herbalists have been using these cycles where generally the medicine is started on the new moon, which marks the beginning of the cycle, and then is completed on the full moon because it's the completion of the cycle. So yeah, you can make really good medicine, without using the moon cycles, and lots of herbalists do, but it just adds a little bit of that magic, that sparkle dust, I call it, to the medicine when we work with the cycles of nature.
That is
Well,
incredible.
we're all interconnected a little bit. I saw a video that was appropriate of yours of the equinox of last year, and it was you and another I don't know, I didn't get her name, but you guys were celebrating the equinox, and I just thought that was good because it ties it into us being interconnected, us feel also the moon, but I don't know if you like roommates in college also start syncing up, so
Yeah.
there's undeniable that we're connected, and so it makes sense that that same spirit in part would be with the plants, because there's and science sometimes has to catch up to what we already feel and resonate, and that just means that we're all connected, so we have to be mindful. One other question, I know this is not scripted, but is ginseng an herb? Because I was thinking about going in the forest with my grandfather hunting ginseng.
Yeah.
Is that wildcrafting at all, or
Yes.
I'm just trying to be a part of the conversation? But I just wanted to ask that one quick question.
Do you want me to answer, Emily? Would you?
Oh, go for it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So absolutely, ginseng is one of the most valuable herbs that we have in North America. Valuable both as just for the energetics of it, for its healing potential and possibility, the history of how it's been used, and also financially wise, it's really it probably is the most expensive plant that we have, and it's actually been being dug out of the wild and exported since the 1700s.
Oh,
As
okay.
soon as it was discovered by actually a Jesuit priest in 1760, they started digging up large amounts of it and shipping it to China. Because even in China, which has its own type of ginseng, American ginseng, which is a Panax quinquefolium, is considered the most valuable ginseng that we have in the world, right? So, the thing about ginseng is that it's an adaptogen. Adaptogens are a group of herbs very, very important for us today because they help the physical body as well as the emotional and spiritual body to adapt to the stresses of modern day life. Most of the herbs that are considered adaptogens are very long living, so they're very old plants. Ginseng will live to be over 100 years old if it's not dug up. And they're very, very slow growing. And this is really important, they're very habitat specific. So unlike a common weedy plant like dandelion, which is every bit as valuable as far as medicinal and nutritional properties go, that will grow anywhere and grow abundantly. Ginseng only grows in very selected places. So that's one of the plants that's considered highly endangered in the North American continent.
Yes.
We generally don't advocate for wildcrafting unless you go out with your grandpa, like the locals would go out with their grandpas and their grandmas and gather enough for their family. We really stress buying it from organic growers, people who are actually what I consider another endangered species, our American farmer. So grow, um, buy organically cultivated ginseng so that you're not destroying the few remaining wild sources that we have. you're still getting high quality plants because they're being organically cultivated, and you're also supporting farmers who are trying to make a living. So it's a win-win on every level.
Oh, that makes sense. Thank you.
I would like to comment on that. I have I'm sorry, it's not a podcast, it's a video on the Sunshine Botanicals YouTube channel on Wildcrafting. And I went out with my herbalists, and I love to take people with me, to learn and see these things up close and personal. And we've been using are focused on wildcrafting since day one, because that's how things were originally created for us. Not everything that we would use in a formulation is always available based on the time of year or based on supply chain or what have you. Our first choice is always wildcrafted tinctures to go into our serums and corrective formulations. Now, wildcrafted and organic farming are great, and I mixed those together. But I just wanted to comment, because wildcrafting is so huge, I would like for you to comment on this for me, because what I've always learned is that, and I've operated from, if we go into the wild, I'll give you an example. Our jewelweed, that's hard to find. Okay, jewelweed is an incredible anti-inflammatory, anti-itch um, herb that goes in several of our formulations and is phenomenal. So I have herbalists that harvest that a couple times of the year, couple times during the year, and will tincture those and send it to us in bulk so we can create the formulations with it. Now, I said all that to say this. I've always been trained and understood that wild crafted ingredients, wild crafted herbs tend to be a little bit stronger because they've had to fight for their own survival out in the wild rather than being nurtured and cultivated like herbs that are grown in an organic farm. So there's an element to that, and that's again an energetic thing, I believe, that they tend to be a little stronger in their end result. How do you feel about that?
Well, I do. I think there's some truth to that. Wild things, whether it's wild animals, like you think about, the wild deer, and when people go to hunt the deer, it is, that venison is supposedly the best, right? I don't know because I don't eat meat, but there versus cultivated, or we can definitely say the same with fish. Like, if you can get wild salmon, everybody who fishes will always say the wild food is so much better. So we would. And that was always the way I was taught as well, and really advocate it with all my students that um, there's an essence in wild things because they are taking care of themselves. Uh, they have to struggle more. They have to fight more for their lives. And, they go through periods of famine and feast, the same with the plants. Sometimes they get all the rain they need and all the sunshine, and other times it's drought conditions and they have to be tougher. And we know when things are overfed, whether it's with too much riches or too much rich food or that it weakens the spirit and the body, right? So there's a truth to that. And but again, I would say that I always emphasize, of course, it's one of our primary arts, the craft of wildcrafting. And we really emphasize with all of the weedy species, using jewelweed as an example, it's definitely a weedy species. It propagates readily, it grows all over, it can be easily cultivated. You can throw a few seeds back in the back of your back garden and it will just take off. So all of those plants, we still really advocate for cultivate for wild harvesting, but it's those native species, those plants that are very habitat specific that have been hugely over harvested. And a lot of it is just as time goes on and we see the success of what we've been teaching and doing, and more people, herbalism is fairly mainstream these days. You can pick up any magazine, you can go to any bookstore, there's tons of books, there's tons of classes offered, really excellent classes. And, there's herb stores everywhere, and it takes tonnage. Like we're talking about massive amounts of material to provide for everybody. And so what we have done for about the last 20 or so years is emphasize that those well-crafted plants that or the plants that we used to wildcraft freely, like golden seal is a really good example. It just isn't abundant anymore in the woods, and it's very, very habitat specific. Ginseng is another one. And so we do really emphasize the organic cultivation. So one big difference that I want to bring out is in the olden days, like say back in the 1970s and 80s, when we were first starting to see a lot of products come out, et cetera, we started seeing some of the evolution of some of the companies now, like Herb Farm was one, Traditional Medicinals was another. We were using primarily store-bought herbs, or herbs that we would buy from the big wholesalers, and the quality was so bad at that time. So because there was no organic cultivation, people weren't enriching the soil, they were just getting mostly the herbs from third world countries or other countries where there was not a concern about the quality. But as the years went on, quality became among the growers, just among the same as we see among the product makers, became a much higher point. People became much more concerned about wanting to get good quality. And so we see tremendous farmers, people who are putting the same kind of attention that you're putting into manufacturing and making these products, they're putting into growing. We also see lots of small farmers doing this. So the quality of these plants have just been so much better, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, so again, like wildcrafting the weedy species that grow abundantly, that propagate themselves, that we still see, like you'll always see dandelion, you'll see burdock, and you'll see jewelweed, you'll see comfrey, which is actually not a wild plant, it's cultivated, but it goes out and grows wild, and in another 100 years, we'll think of it as a wild species. So all of those are really good to wildcraft, but we're thinking, there's about 30 or 40 plants that have been identified on the North American continent as being at risk or endangered. And that's why we created United Plant Savers, was to really advocate for propagation and so conservation and preservation of our at-risk native species. And people can go on the United Plant Savers. We have a fabulous website that has all kinds of information, and it lists the plants that have been identified as being at risk and that we really advocate that people get from organically cultivated sources. So yeah, it's not a long list. It's actually a short list. We say we figured this out before it was too late. None of them are extinct.
Yes.
They still live in the wilds, but they're limited in their habitat.
How can we support you in that? In that, well, it's a nonprofit organization. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a nonprofit. Actually,
The website is great. How can we help? Because we want, how can we help you?
well, I think it's just, I think the best way to help is becoming informed. That's always the best thing. So like educating ourselves. And so when I teach my herb classes, it's always one of the very first classes I teach now. And in my home study course, it's the very first lesson is, just learning that it's how to use plants and how to use them properly and how to make like the tinctures and all our medicines from them. All of those are the skills, and learning wildcrafting skills is all very important when we first go out and, enthusiastically want to learn about herbs. So learning all that's important, but also learning how do we protect the very things that we're using. The very things that we love, we don't want to love them to death. We want to love them so they thrive and are here for future generations. And so probably the best thing is education is go online, go to United Plant Savers and look at that list and go, if I'm using things on that list. And, I want to, in full disclosure, like when I wrote my first book, The Woman's Herb Book in 1993, United Plant Savers wasn't formed. United Plant Savers is 30 years old. It was formed in 1994. Actually, we're 31 years old. So I wrote my first herb book before I was even thinking about plant conservation. And when in that book, I talk a lot about false unicorn root, and Chamallarian luteum is the botanical name, and how it's so incredible for a lot of women's issues like infertility, which a lot of women who, not so much in our generation, but in the generation after us, we're having problems with fertility a lot because of the plastics that have been introduced to our environment. People weren't aware that those plastics were endocrine disruptors, right? So we started seeing generations after us, just young women and men as well, having terrible problems with reproductive issues. Our problem in my generation was, you look at a guy across the street and you'd get pregnant. But, unfortunately, following that, it was, we started seeing these horrendous problems, and it's only been identified in the last 20 years as the plastics is one of the main things. So I was talking a lot about false unicorn, but false unicorn is one of our most at-risk plants in North America. So it was through education. I was educating myself as I was educating other people. So, we just
You sound so much like Dr. Phil. That's my husband. He always said, "I'm the Dr. Phil with hair."
his book is an excellent reference for beginners as well as people who are already practicing herbalism. It's a really wonderful, practical journey into the heart of herbalism. It's so
As you're speaking about, I mean, this is just a perfect segue to this. His intention with that book is to help people really be able to have, not only a starting point, but how do you do this? And being able to take that, I told him he should have named it Herbalism for Dummies because I could have done it. But it's wonderful because you can take that. It's like a field guide. For those of you that haven't seen the interior of the book, it's deep. It's got some major stuff. It's all his photography, and it helps you understand, the elements of plants, how to identify a plant to know if what you're about to pick that you think is something, is it really? How to identify the leaf pattern, what yes. Oh, it's amazing. How and what are the constituents of the plant? What does it do? What do you use it for? What does it mix well with? So it's a great book to take if you're into hiking, this summer or even in the fall, you would be amazed at what you could find. And what's even better when he did his herb classes is he would take you out on an herb walk and help you understand whatever was, native at the time, what was happening, and bring it back into the classroom the next day and learn how to take what you found and make medicine.
yeah.
Because his goal was really for people to be not only educated but independent, because we've become a dependent society, have we not? That everything's done for us, everything is, free, quick, and easy. And we are disconnected from our world in so many ways, especially with technology. So many of us don't even know how to grow our own food, build our own homes, or make our own medicine. And he saw that a long time ago. And he said to him, it was power. And it was power to know that that there's no fear. God put everything here for a reason. We've just gotten detached from it. We don't know what we're looking at and what to do with it. And it's so much like cooking, really. You know that when you're in the herb kitchen or in the kitchen, it's the same concepts, right? Of blending these beautiful plants together and, making your own concoction. So that was the fun part to me.
I just wanted to I saw a video of Rosemary where she's talking about, and it looked beautiful, this bowl talking about mixing up a recipe.
Yes.
And she was going and saying, I know what to put in here because I've tried each individual herb separately. And so I can make my own. I was thinking, like, what is that? A salsa? Is that potpourri? I'm
Right.
coming at it. This is the first time I'm seeing a lot of this, but it drew me in. I'm like, that is beautiful. What that's got to work. But look at that. And it's so it seems like you're both saying the same things in a lot of regards. In that
We are.
that like wildcrafting is sort of like your R&D lab now. It used to be where you had to get most of it, but now the farm raised has come up such a quality that you can do your R&D in the wild and actually source out quality
Yes.
products which weren't available 30 years ago. And
Exactly.
so there's a hierarchy. So we need to be stewards of our knowledge, but yet we
Yes.
need to democratize the process through education. And Rosemary had said about, you know, getting the learning curve up, getting this into the conversations of obviously people like that book for dummies. That's yeah, I would buy that, and because I think even if we don't know everything about it, there's a sense that we want to. I think no matter
Yes.
where people are at in their journey, I think they want to do right, and if they can feel good, and to Emily's point about being not helpless but being overserved. Yeah, we've come down that now. It's a jingle and people dancing, saying, "Take this pill, look," while all the ramifications go underneath, may cause dry mouth death, but yet we're all dancing, and we're like, this is the easy button.
Yes.
And I guess our history from all both your experiences saying no, there's no easy button, but there's an easy way to do it right. Is that off?
Spot on, Mark. Yeah. Thank you, Mark, for that. That's a wonderful reflection. And I do want to point out that, like any new study, it can just seem overwhelming. Like, where do I start? There just seems to be endless amounts of herbs and so many things to learn. But I always point out to people that, this is the science and art of herbalism has been practiced by people around the world. It's one of the things that joins us as humanity. It's almost like breathing. It's it's been a part of our history since the very beginning of time, the oldest system of healing, and also the art of eating. We're eating plants, and plants are herbs, and herbs are plants. And so learning this is kind of genetically encoded in us, quite
Yes.
honestly. And once you introduce people to just a few basic principles, like Emily was saying, just the art of coming into your house and making a salve and a tincture and herbal teas, it's once you learn that, and you learn maybe 10 herbs, very common, very available, it just starts to just tumble inside yourself. I always feel it's like the ancestors within you. It's like they start talking to you. And then you're out in your garden and the plants are like talking to you, and the weeds, and literally, I don't mean, of course, talking to you in a human voice, but you're starting to feel this energy. I've seen
Yes.
it happen literally with thousands of people in the 50 plus years I've been teaching herbalism. It is not a hard science or an art to learn. Now, of course, if people want to go into clinical practice, if they want to become practitioners of clinical herbalism, then like any study, you can continue to study and you continue to learn. That is more involved, but learning how to be a home herbalist, a community herbalist, even somebody who is making medicine for the community and helping out with the simple illnesses, the everyday illnesses, is a very easy step. I actually put it into these steps. First of all, it's like get 3 really good herb books, like 3 good herb books that are written by herbalists that you could trust. We just talked about practical herbalism. I also have a really excellent book that I wrote specifically for beginners called Medicinal Herbs, A Beginner's Guide. It's just like a step-by-step. Here's how we do it, fellas. It's very easy and readily available. You can buy it online and, at thrift books or any of the bookstores. And then it's actually getting like choosing about 10 herbs that you're going to actually research. You're going to spend a little bit of time getting to know those. And those would be common herbs that are safe. They're like herbs like, they would be herbs like calendula and like yarrow and like elderberries and like dandelion leaves. So, 10 or 12, not much more than that. And you just start by researching those herbs. By researching, I just mean you take 5 minutes and you read about them in all 3 of your herb books, never just one book, just getting one person's idea. 3 books. So you kind of put this information that takes about maybe 10 or 15 minutes per plant. So I'm trying to stress this isn't like when I talk about studying where you're going to be studying for hours and hours and hours. And then ideally the next thing is you start trying them, go, I read chamomile was good for my upset stomach, or in the evening when I feel stressed out, I'm just going to drink chamomile by itself. So you really begin to understand the energetics. So you've read, your mind is stimulated. You've read that it's safe, that if you brew chamomile too long, it becomes bitter, and that bitter is actually good for my digestion. But if you brew it lightly, it's good for my nerves. This is in those books. So it's all very easy. So now you drink your tea and you let your body become what we call the organoleptic tester. Your body is letting you know how this herb is working on you. And then that begins the process of understanding. When you've done that with your 10 herbs and you've read about them, all of a sudden you're tumbled into the world of herbalism. And then the last step is, now I'm going to make something with it. Maybe a tea, maybe a salve, maybe a tincture. And all of those things are simpler than making a batch of oatmeal cookies. It's actually as simple as making a bowl of oatmeal. So, and I'm rest assured, those are to me are the simple steps that get people. That's why we've seen this huge revolution in why there's so many people interested in herbs. One of the things they're rediscovering is herbalism actually does work. That's why people have been sharing it for literally thousands and thousands of years. And things that didn't work were shed along the way. So what we've done is we kept the tradition alive by moving ahead with the very best of what works. And we're adding to that today through our scientific studies and scientific knowledge. And so the fact that it works and also that it's easy to practice, those are the reasons that we see. And also I would share because it makes people feel good inside, not just the fact that we can take care of our colds and flus, etc., but also on a deeper level. It just, when people are in their garden or out wildcrafting or in their kitchen making herbal products, they're happy in spite of everything going on in the world. Happiness starts to bubble up out of us again. And when we're happy, we make other people happy. So
Gardening is better than therapy. It's cheaper than therapy, and you get tomatoes. You know? I'm sorry.
have that sign, Emily, hanging above my garden. Actually, it's like
I do.
cheap gardening, cheaper than therapy. And I get tomatoes.
There you go. There you go. I've got to share. Okay, I have to share this story. You guys, everything she's saying is true. Once you just pick up one thing and you start to get it, all the lights go on, amazing things happen. And some of the most fun I have had with my friends is in my kitchen. I have a big island. And okay, so when the elderberries come in, which is August, like the second weekend, they're out there now, right? We're almost there to make elderberry tincture. And we have our aprons on. We're in the kitchen. We're having a ball. I go to the liquor store and I'm asking for like these bottles of 100 proof vodka, and I get them regularly. And they're like, well, she must be having a party all. But you use the grain alcohol to extract the medicine from the elderberries to make the tincture. That's your class, all that right there. But I'm feel like I'm pinging all over the place, but it's fun. When your friends are around, we've got our aprons on, we've got the strained elderberries, we've got vodka, we've got maybe a little cayenne, we've got some honey, and we're cooking. Okay. But everybody is harvesting the elderberries and we're doing what we do to get them ready to actually tincture. And everybody goes home with their immune system medicine, for the year. And we have a blast, you know so it's so much like cooking, and when you get involved, that's where the art comes in. And I'm going to tell you that once you actually experience this even a little bit, it is so fascinating. And the energy is, like she said, it's what we feel. And I think there's a huge movement on planet Earth that we're coming back. I think that God is doing powerful things. That's my faith. And it's like, wait a minute. I feel that we are really connecting with the medicine that He's given us, and where we've been hijacked by the pharmaceutical companies for so many years. And God's medicine is healing. I'm grateful for medicine for trauma care, but when it comes to healing and wellness, uh, this is about reconnecting with the earth, feeling those plants, and having some control back in our own lives, because we've lost a lot of that along the way. Sunshine Botanicals was green before it was a marketing strategy in the beauty business. And we have grown from this small company to where we are now, but we're not losing our way, nor have we sold out in this process. And that's why this is so important to me, to bring you these people and these resources and this information. And Rosemary, take us through your school, would you? So if we're like, okay, this is great. First of all, it's online. That's wonderful. So everybody can do it, right?
Yeah, I actually wrote the first edition of my home study course, The Science and Art of Herbalism, in 1981. So I've had
Right.
thousands and thousands of students. I think it sort of started a little revolution. Um, and it's a deep dive. It's a beginner's course, but it takes people through the whole journey of herbalism so that they're capable of practicing, not as clinical herbalists, because you really need to have one-on-one work with that, but as community herbalists. That's definitely for family, like how to use herbs safely, um, how to grow them, how to make all of your medicines. It's just a simple step by step, but it takes you very deep, into them, so that when people are finished with the course, they actually are capable of practicing as community herbalists, which is one step outside the home. It's taking care of your family, but also if your community, if they need help. So, yeah, it's a wonderful course, and it's what there's some really excellent courses now available online. The one thing I think that's the advantage of ours, we still correct everybody's homework. I can't do it all because we have so many students, but I have a group of herbalists who are all very accomplished and all who studied with me, who go through everybody's homework because you have to do homework and send that in to us. You can either set, we still get written homework. So, and we also, because not everybody likes working online, we still do a printed binder, like Dr. Christopher's old printer binder, right, from
Yes.
back in the 1980s. So we have it's about a 500-page binder. So a lot of people like working not online because they have to work online so much. So we still
Yes.
have a printed binder if people prefer to do that way.
Yeah, that
And
makes so much sense. Wait a minute. Sorry. You just made a huge connection, energetic connection, I guess, for me. There is a connection there when you're doing this, when you're writing and how the brain learns and processes. That approach to study with herbalism makes so much sense in the things you've been talking about for us today versus, well,
yeah, it is true. You know, we definitely have noticed a difference in the quality of work with some of our students when we went online, which was many years ago, of course. But you know what? There are some students who jump in and it's just like, oh, one more thing to race through. Like, oh, this looks cool. You know, we'll do this. Where always before we would note with students that, you know, it was an investment of time and energy and resources. You know, they're putting their money, their time, and their energy into it. And so it was just a deepener. You could see that. So we still have high quality students. Most of our students come on, even when they're online students, and really put their heart and soul into it. We can see that through their homework. So when we do see students who are trying to race through it, like we always remind them, you know, like, you know, you have to
slow
really
down.
do huh?
Slow
Slow
down.
down. Herbalism is a lifetime study. You're never going to learn it in 6 months, you know, or 4 months. It's a lifetime study. Even when you graduate from this course, you're still going on. You know, the herbalism will just take you as forever into it and as deep as you want to go. So, and that's one of the exciting things about it. We never graduate really from learning about plants. There's always something new and exciting to learn.
I
But
also noticed it was listed as a correspondent course, which immediately took me back to my childhood of putting sending a postcard out of either Popular Mechanics or Entrepreneur Magazine and waiting for that pamphlet or waiting for that, whatever chemistry kit or whatever it was. And I think that, yeah, because we are conditioned, I'm in digital marketing, so we're conditioned to bring them through a thermometer, take them from red to green, point. And this is the exact opposite. I think correspondence is a good way because you have a time to like digest your questions, the anticipation of the feedback. And it's something that is so frictionless. That's what we try to artificially create in the digital marketing world. But that anticipation and that connection. I mean,
Boom,
Martha said,
boom,
I
boom.
mean, Mark, I was looking at Mark because I'm sorry, Martha, you can jump in too. I'm sorry. But
No, it's
the,
okay. I mean,
but
I took a lot of Dr. Phil's courses, and his book is really designed to take it out into the wild. I mean, even the paper that it's made of is really made so that you can just like dust the dirt off of it, and it's not like you're going to stain it like you are any other book that you would take out into into the wild. And so, herbalism in itself is just such a powerful tool. And it's funny because people will always come to me. I'm kind of known, I hate to say it like this, but the witch doctor of our family. And because they know that I know that I know what to do. And so I use a lot of herbs. I've done a lot of herbals, and so it is really a gift to be able to, especially when, like we were shut down, I'm in California, so we were shut down for like 8 months and we didn't have access. You couldn't even go to the store. The health food stores weren't open. The only stores that were really open were the big box stores. And so I had a lot of stuff in my cupboard, and I remember even going out on a cruise, and the flu went through the cruise, and I was like, come to my room. I have stuff. You know what I mean? And it's like everybody was dropping by our room to get a little something to make sure that we kept their immune system strong. And we had 21 people on that trip, and no one got sick. But they literally were shutting down whole areas of the ship. And so it's just great to have these tools that you can take with you. And, I've got remedies in case, there's a car accident and I've got stuff in my handbag or in the inside of my car, just you have no idea what you don't know. And so it's such a powerful tool to be able to take this information, learn it, and be able to have it when you need it.
Martha, you just brought something to mind that I have to share. Do you remember Dr. Phil talking about how he always carried a tincture of cayenne or capsicum with him everywhere he went?
Yeah.
He always had it in jacket pockets wherever he was, and he cracked me up. He was a funny teacher. My
It-
husband was a storyteller. He was a lot like Will Rogers. That was Phil. But he cracked people up because people could get it. He said, yes, because capsicum, if someone has a heart attack, you open their mouth, you take straight capsicum, put it right under the tongue. It goes right into the bloodstream and could save somebody's life until 911 or until an ambulance arrives. It's incredible. And then he said, and you know what? And if you don't ever need it for that, it's always great to help spice up your chili at Wendy's.
You know what,
Yeah, I
Emily,
remember him telling us about a motorcyclist that he came upon who was in a car accident, and the motorcyclist was laying on the ground, and he distributed capsicum, and he says he believes that saved that guy's
Saved
life
his
because
life. The
he
blood.
knew that he had to have internal bleeding,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
um and so it's so powerful to just know what you know,
Guys, the things we've been talking about is what we're all experiencing right now. And I think all this we could talk for days, comes back to connection. We're a disconnected society focused on these little tools and computers and things like that. The energy around this, the energy of the plants, the energy of the human body, God's divine creation, right? I feel everything is totally being reconnected, which is what we need the most as human beings. We need connection. We need support. We need to know that there's things we can still trust somewhere, you know, and that there are these resources. So I just feel that this is a microcosm of what we're talking about. What we're the four of us with everyone else that's out there. We need that connection and to come back and find things that are so beautiful and so powerful. I just, I'm ready to get back in the kitchen. Actually, I haven't done it in a while, but anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. But when I'm working with herbs in my work, and I want Rosemary to speak to this, if you would. We deal with anti-inflammatory diets, reducing inflammation, and I approach corrective skincare from the inside out. So we spend a lot of time educating about gut health, diet, nutrition, enzyme therapy, because, we've been conditioned by the beauty industry to buy the latest, greatest serum, cream, or injection to deal with an aging issue that has an internal root cause. So that's where my education, both for consumers and estheticians, comes from. So, with that being said, could you speak to us on all the things that you work with in your practice? Conditions like rosacea, dermatitis, psoriasis, inflammatory issues, acne, you name it, and working with the gut. Can you help us? Can you bring that together from your perspective on how the herb world provides solutions for all the conditions, GERD, indigestion, reflux, that all will show up on the skin?
Well,
Can you?
I definitely agree with you that almost all skin issues are internal. Perhaps the only ones that would be exceptions to those would be things like poison oak or ivy, the rashes that people get. Even that um, can be internal, like if they're spreading through the body, then treating that internally is also as important as treating it externally. So definitely, our skin is a reflection of what our insides are doing. And I've
Yes.
always felt, I actually have to say that when I would see people have very bad skin problems and stuff, I would say to them, well, you're actually very fortunate because you can see your problems, right?
Oh,
Because they're coming out. So you actually are forced to deal with them. A lot of people might notice that they have, really bad digestion or low slow bowel transit, or, they're just not, their immune system might be very weak, but they won't deal with it because it's not showing, it's not apparent. But when something is flaring up in your face or all over your skin, it's like, oh, I got to deal with that. So it's like a red flag going off that there's something internally that, because as you know, and I think probably most of our listeners do, our skin is a living organ. It's our largest organ of elimination and assimilation. Everything we put on it is actually assimilated. And it's also it is our largest organ of elimination. We have, our urine and our bowels, but our skin is the largest. It's where we excrete from. And so, of course, what we're treating internally is so important. So almost everything that you mentioned, like all of those, which seem like very disconnected imbalances, are all inflammatory conditions. So
Right.
using herbs that are anti-inflammatory as well as antiviral and antibacterial are really important. But a lot of the irritations that we see on our skin need soothing. They need anti-inflammatory. So, emphasize, and also they need antibacterial and antiviral properties, and antimicrobial as well. And herbs, the wonderful thing about them is, a lot like our own human bodies, they're comprised of literally thousands of constituents. So, and a plant that has like anti-inflammatory properties is most likely also going to have antiviral, antimicrobial, antibacterial in different degrees, right? And that's one of the beautiful places where science comes in. We have the traditional uses. We can learn that, we can study in the older books as well as more recent ones, that burdock, for instance, is very high in different constituents, or excuse me, has traditional uses for the skin. It's one of my favorite herbs, actually, internally, for teenage children, especially, but for anybody who have skin problems, because it's a mild cleanser, detoxifier of the system, and it works primarily through the cardiovascular and the liver system. Um, but but more modern science gives us that term in scientific terms. It will tell us the chemical constituents it's high in and how those are working on the body. So I love that science. Almost always we see that science is validating traditional uses. We
Sure.
go, that's what our ancients knew without the microscopes, et cetera. They just used it by their senses, by sensing and working with the plants. And
You
so,
know, I'm
oh,
sorry.
go ahead. I'm sorry, Emily.
Um, Speaking of those plants and working with burdock, I use that in my problem skin cleansing formula called Redness Relief Bar. I've got a lot of that with Paudiarco, and I blend some of those things together, and that is an incredible herb. The other thing I want to mention, just to help people put this in perspective, dandelion root. When we're working on the skin, the liver is a big thing now for everybody. Liver health is part of the digestive system, and the liver needs so much support because it filters the blood and it helps the body to eliminate waste. And dandelion is so incredibly powerful for liver cleansing and support. And if you think about it, thinking about what's happened in our culture, this is where my head is right now as I listen to the conversation, is we have companies that specialize in coming to your home to kill all the weeds with chemicals so you have a beautiful lawn. And these beautiful dandelions that had been associated as just weeds to most people, they have no idea how much liver support and how much potassium comes from dandelion root and how healing that is. So when you're dealing with a skin condition of any kind, liver support is huge, and having the bowels eliminate and supporting that gut. So that's the way my wheels roll when I'm working with someone to build a protocol. So, and I refer to Rosemary's information in all my herb books, especially when I'm blending and compounding, because it is a lifelong learning thing, right? So maybe you can talk to us a little bit more about maybe dandelion and the liver and how that plays. Where's the priority to you?
I think you described dandelion really well. It's one of our most common weeds, and it grows throughout all the temperate regions of the world. So you find it everywhere you travel in the world. And in most countries, it's a very important plant, both medicinally and edibly. So like if you travel throughout any part of the Mediterranean, they're happy to see dandelion growing. They use it in their salads, the leaves. They use the root sometimes as a root vegetable, usually cooked with other vegetables because it is a bitter. But like you were saying, it's one of our most common useful plants. It's like I would say if we were to list the top 10 plants in the world that are used medicinally, dandelion is one of those 10, if not right on the very top. It's right there. So, and it's available for everybody for free in our backyards, right? Um, I always so it's like you were saying, it's a wonderful, wonderful herb that's used as a liver detoxifier, which just basically means it helps the liver with liver congestion and liver digestive problems. Anytime anybody has any kind of digestive problems, you can almost always relate it back to the liver. So using dandelion and burdock, we usually put those two herbs together because they are really, really good. They work together really well. And where burdock, I mentioned a little bit before, is not, it's considered a bitter, but it's actually not very bitter. It has a lot of inulin in it, so it's very, very good for diabetics as well. Not insulin, but inulin, which is very excellent for the pancreas. But so it's oftentimes used with dandelion, which is very bitter. But dandelion's bitterness really stimulates the digestion. You know, when the minute we take those bitters into our mouth, there's a reflex that happens in our brain that actually then sends a message to our digestive system to start secreting digestive enzymes. And so, yeah, just drinking dandelion or having a nice tincture that you have next to your meal, next to your kitchen table, that you just take just a little, like can be a quarter of a teaspoon, a half a teaspoon, or a shot glass of it. And it just really keeps everything moving through your digestion, and it helps the liver detoxify. It helps it do its job. Because when we think of the liver, it's kind of the workhouse, the workhorse of our body, right? It does more uh, jobs than any other of our organ systems, and especially towards detoxifying and cleansing. So when you talk about skin health, you know, it really is important for our digestive liver and brings all those bitter herbs like dandelion and burdock into play. Those are so important for that. So, and no harm. I think it's also important to mention that with both burdock and dandelion, since we're speaking about both of them, there's no counterindications. Yeah, I've never in my 50 years have met anybody who has allergies or have had any negative reaction to the dandelion root, unless just to say it's bitter. It's like a bitter. So, and I do want to mention that the root and leaves are actually both medicinal. The entire plant is, but they're used for different purposes. The root is considered to be more specific for the liver, and the leaf is considered to be more specific for the urinary tract, for our kidneys and urinary system. They're a mild diuretic. The leaves are one of our highest sources of you mentioned potassium, definitely, and also vitamin A. So in a cup, 1 cup of the fresh dandelion green, you get 25 ounces of 25 IUs of vitamin A, more than your daily need of vitamin A, which is also very important to the health of your skin.
Dandelion is an awesome alternative also to, well, let me ask you how you feel about that. Is dandelion is an alternative to Lasix, especially for fluid retention with so many health issues?
You mean as a mild diuretic, how it works with the system? Yeah, it's so true. I remember when I had my little herb store on the Russian River in Northern California, there'd be a lot of wealthy women who would come down from San Francisco because we were an hour and a half north of San Francisco. And every year these women would forget quote unquote their diuretic pills at home. And they would come into the store and they would use dandelion greens. I would give them they didn't like the bitter taste of dandelion. So I would give it to them in tincture form. And they would always come in, oh, Rosemary, dear, this tea, because I was very young at that time, right? And Rosemary, dear, this tea works better than my diuretic pills. And I'd say, yeah, it does. And it's so much better for you because diuretics are very, very stressful on the kidney. And when the kidney stress, it puts tension on the heart. And what I have seen in my work as an herbalist is diuretics are very freely administered to people, right? When women get older and men as well, there's always a bit of water retention. You see a little bit of swelling in the ring fingers and wrists and stuff and around the feet. And so they go to see their doctors and their doctors recommend diuretics. And what happens then is that the real issue is not being addressed, the underlying issue that's causing the water retention. And so then that stresses the kidneys, because the kidneys are having now to work really hard because I have a pharmaceutical in them. And then that puts pressure on the cardiovascular system. So it's usually this is true, like within 6 to 8 months after taking diuretics over a period of time, they now have heart conditions. So they're going to their doctor with heart conditions, which is even more serious than the original condition. So just by using dandelion, you could avoid that cascade of effects. Dandelion will not work like Lasix. It's not just going to go in and drain your kidneys, overwork your kidneys. It's a mild diuretic. It gently stimulates the kidneys while it's working healthily on every part of your body. And that excess fluid is released gently from the system, and that doesn't put pressure on the heart. So, I mean, I also want to say there are definitely times when pharmaceuticals are absolutely needed. And you had mentioned this, Emily, before, for life-threatening situations, for serious situations where the herbs are not working, then yes, pharmaceuticals are incredible. And I always say it's not either or. These systems can work very harmoniously together, and they should be. Like, practitioners should be looking at the benefits of both and how you can incorporate both into health protocols. But most certainly herbs, you always want to start. This was Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine. His teachings were, you start with the most effective and least harmful medicine on the body, and then you work your way up. If the
And he
herbs
said, first, do no harm.
first do no harm. And then he also said, you start with the speech, you talk, so talk therapy. And then if not, then your herbs, and then the strong herbs, and then the knife. But we would go, knife meaning surgery, was kind of how they would look at those steps. So we would say, sometimes just talking to people is helpful, just helping people by being kind and thoughtful and listening. But of course, if it's physical, it's usually more than that. So gentle teas, and if those gentle teas don't work, your stronger medicine. If that doesn't work, then, you go see a good holistic medical practitioner who might offer you some medicine that's not super harmful, but that's helpful. And then surgery, it's usually your last step, or some of the more chemical, so there's a step process that goes with that. But so often today people are trained, and you had mentioned this earlier, Emily, to just, give up their power and go immediately to the pharmacy. And that sometimes causes more harm. It can cause more harm in certain situations because you're not allowing the body, which is incredibly intelligent, to repair itself. You don't allow the plants that God has put it on this earth to do their work. And they're also so very powerful. So, yeah.
I
So
have
the teaching and learning this is so important. Yeah.
absolutely. I'm being cognizant of your time, but I have an idea, and it's okay if you want to answer later. I just had a great idea that would you be willing to come back like on a rotating basis where we can discuss maybe 2 or 3 herbs in depth and build a
Yeah,
series of
I
that.
love talking to Emily, and, sure. If
Okay,
you'd
great.
like to have me
Yeah, I
back,
think it'd
I'd
be
love
so
to come back.
valuable for us. Yeah,
It
yeah.
will.
Uh,
And let me throw something else in here on top of what Mark has said. One thing I'd like to put out there that people understand is understanding body systems is important with the herbs. So it's easy to take a traditional Western mindset and apply, take an herb for a symptom without understanding the root cause, and are they choosing the right herb for what they're dealing with. So understanding body systems, I'd like to maybe, Mark, I'd like to throw that in. Maybe we can bring that to the table. Maybe we can, this is just a thought, maybe talk about the digestive system on one episode, maybe the respiratory system, maybe, the skeletal skin, whatever it might be, whatever works. But I think maybe we could take your idea, Mark, and build that in with helping people understand how the body's actually working, because I think we know more about how to repair our cars than our own bodies.
yeah, I think that'll
That
come naturally. I'm getting a free book from Rosemary. And so I'm going to take that
this
and I'm
one.
going to, yes, exactly. And so I'm going to take that and I'm going to have 3 questions that for the next time, and whatever you all want to do, that's fine too. But I didn't want this connection to end without setting up a
Thank
reconnection so I can anticipate getting more knowledge. And
That's
then we can
amazing.
talk about Sage Mountain, and if it's open year round, what I could do. I think it might actually be a happy accident that me starting from the baseline I am, a lot of people might be at that point or greater, and that makes your both all three of your experience sort of make sense, make it digestible, make it real world, so that we're not just another podcast, but just telling about. I mean, there's so much stuff out there. I think
Yes.
that this is the type of thing that I would watch if I was interested. I'm hoping that others share that interest too, because it is time proving. Actually, I had a neighbor that was from Japan that was amazed at our dandelions, because in Japan they're left on the lawn because they're,
Yes.
oh, she's like, oh no, so beautiful. I'm like, oh no, true green, and so it was and I think that's where culturally we need to open up and
I agree.
understand that, so wherever we are, there's always a good point to get quiet, expand our understanding, know that it's just nice to know that there's something out there that does work, that it doesn't have to be the way it is. So anyhow, Rosemary, thank you for all of your time, and
Yes.
Emily has some
Yes.
closing
Martha has
thoughts here.
something she wants to say.
I have
But
Okay.
one more Phil statement.
closing. Okay. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've got Martha, you have the floor.
Yeah. So one of Phil's statements was, if it's growing in your yard, you need
Oh,
to be thinking about what's going on in your body, because God always provides you what you need. And if it's growing outside and you have a plant that's growing up and it's a weed, what does that weed do? Because it's likely something you need.
It's so true. Yeah. Backyard
Yeah.
medicine. It's the
Yeah,
best. Yeah.
it is.
Oh,
medicine.
wonderful.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Just with dandelions, just don't get them from the side of the road because of the pesticides. And if you do find like some virgin fields where they're big leaves. I mean, those are so much. I mean, and they're dark, and you can just see. So I don't know. Again, that's just a silly point, but that's observation that. So
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like a lot of people use chemical fertilizers on their lawns and stuff. So you want to think about that. Again, it's using the same consciousness that you might use when you go grocery shopping. Most of us are aware now that, we don't want to buy food that's been heavily fertilized and fungicide and pesticide, because we know that if it's killing off the bees and the butterflies and the birds, it's also not good for us. So, yeah, thankfully people are becoming aware of what they're eating, but definitely when we go out to gather our plants, we don't want to, we want to think about, is this area not been sprayed, or
Right.
if it's growing close to the side of the road, there's a lot of toxicity that comes from the cars, which unfortunately, we can't avoid because we're breathing the air. And, I have to say, like, one of the things about once, I think it was John Murr who said this, once you start tugging at a single string in nature, you find it's attached to everything. And I
Yes.
want to say that I think that's one of the beauties about when you tune into nature through the plants or through any part of nature. It can be the birds or rocks or whatever, but once you tune in to nature, you begin to see that thread go out and how we really are connected with everything. It makes us be much more thoughtful about being good caretakers here, about when we're taking care of our own backyards in a really good way, that's helping our whole community take care of their backyards. For instance, like what we plant in our backyards, what we don't spray on our backyards is helping everybody, because it's all attached. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do, but I think we are waking up and really attempting to do this work together. I see that everywhere I travel in the world, that people are becoming much more conscious about this beautiful planet that we live on and
Yes.
wanting to care for it in a better way. So yeah, and
You
love of
know,
plants is definitely one way to do it.
I can't wait for a retreat so we have more time to learn and to
Yeah,
talk.
that'd be so fun. Yes.
In
Yeah, I love that
closing,
idea. Yeah,
since we're
so
doing,
absolutely.
yeah, let me say this, if you would, Rosemary, tell us how to start. Tell us how to take your training. Tell us about the course. Maybe you can, we will include links when we're done with the podcast. Mark's going to put all that out there. But tell us next steps, please. And if you can give us a little, a teaser about your course, how long, what the length of the course is, what's involved. And also, please give us a little snapshot of Sage Mountain and what could be waiting for us there.
Well, thank you, Emily. So the Science and Art of Herbalism, as I mentioned before, it's an online and also a printed version. You can buy them both, or you can get them, each one, so it's not as expensive. And it does include homework. So we do grading, we review everybody. So there's teachers that work with you. So it's not like you're out there all by yourself. That's one of the really distinctive things about our courses. We still are working with our students, and there's online forums and lots of videos and hands-on stuff. And it's a 10 lesson course. It takes most people at least a year. We give them up to 3 years. So you have 3 years that you can complete it. But for most people, a year is great. If they do like a lesson a month, that's great. Um, it's not like just a sit down read through course. There's lots and lots of hands-on stuff. So I really like to warn people of that. It's not like I'm just going to read a book. We're interacting, and there's hands-on activities in every single lesson. So yeah, and you can go online to the Science of Art of Herbalism. Emily will provide the link for that. And there's lots of information on there. So yeah, and then Sage Mountain is just this absolutely beautiful. Oh, and as far as when it starts and ends, it's a self-study. You can start at any time. You can spend as much or as little time as you want on it. But as I said, we expect you to be done at the end of 3 years. If not, you can pay a little bit more and extend it for another length of time, like another, I think it's a year and a half. So people can add on, and you can stay on as long as you want. That's up to you. But Sage Mountain is a beautiful wilderness retreat center. It's a botanical sanctuary. We have done a lot of replanting of native at-risk plants, so you can actually walk through the woods. It's 600 acres of wilderness, and it abuts 25,000 acres. So it's a very large stretch of wilderness. So
Wow.
we are visited by deer and moose and bobcats. All the big animals of northern New England live there with us. So we live in harmony with the animals. I lived there for about 35 years, and my husband and I recently moved to a little bit north of there. And a young herbalist named Emily Ruff, a brilliant young herbalist, is stewarding it with her partner, Rod. And they steward it as a retreat center. So they do a lot of herb classes. It's not open year round because we're in Vermont and it's in the mountains. So it's almost impossible to, I mean, you can get up there if you have a four-wheel, really heavy-duty vehicle. Otherwise, people wouldn't be able to get up there. We used to run our classes from spring through October, and then the snows would usually come in. It's a gorgeous place. We had extensive herb gardens there. So they both are medicinal gardens and ornamental gardens. And then, as I said, our big pride was our native at-risk gardens, where we're restoring native plants into the wilderness there. So, and Emily and her partner, what they've really focused on is they do a number of herb classes for adults, but they focus on children. They have
Hmm.
kids camps there every day, and are primarily serving the underserved children who can't afford to go to camps and stuff. They have grants and scholarships, and they're teaching them herbalism and outdoor skills and being out in nature. So I'm very proud of the work going on at Sage Mountain. It's a very beautiful center. You can go online and look up Sage Mountain Herbal Retreat Center and Botanical Sanctuary and learn a lot about it. They have a lot of pictures of the wildlife there, and yeah, so yeah, it's a very beautiful
This
place.
is magical. You know that? This is just everything about this is absolutely amazing. And I cannot thank you enough for your time, Martha and Mark. For those of you that I didn't introduce him, Mark is our sound engineer, and he brings us to life and makes all this happen. Martha is one of our educators for Sunshine Botanicals. She's been with us since almost the beginning. And she's one of our she's our lead ambassador out there, and we are all on a mission. So I'm thrilled. I want to thank all of our viewers for taking the time to join us today and having the interest to really explore. We don't know what we don't know, right? And what an amazing time to be alive. And there's so much happiness, there's so much joy, and there's so much positive. That's what's coming out of this in every way that we go. We're thrilled and honored to share this with you. We'd love your feedback. Please like and share this podcast with your friends. Follow Miss Rosemary, and we will have links here to all of the things that we have discussed And yay, she has said yes, that she will come back and we are going to put together some workshops or some programs or episodes, if you will, in the future where we can drill down onto more specific things and really take advantage of her expertise as we go. I am thrilled. If Send us your thoughts, like and subscribe. And Rosemary, do you have any special either offers or things you would like to say in closing to everyone?
I just want to thank you for having me on your podcast. And just want to encourage everybody who's listening. If you not dug into herbalism, this is the time. Just start a little plot in your backyard of your favorite culinaries. Do want to just maybe mention one thing. Martha was talking about, the plants in your kitchen. Some of the most important medicinal herbs, some of our most powerful, are your kitchen culinaries. So next time you're sprinkling rosemary, oregano, thyme on, remember those are some of the most important medicinals. You already are a practicing herbalist if you're using them. Thank you very much.
This is great. Thank you, guys.